A pleasant morning to you and a very warm welcome to HOWA's virtual caravan class on solar oven cooking. There will be a 30-minute talk from our presenter, followed by 30 minutes for questions and answers. The chat will open up at 9:25 for you to submit your questions on the topic of solar oven cooking. The class ends at 10. However, the chat feature will remain open for an additional 15 minutes to continue interaction with the presenter and attendees. I'm excited to introduce you to our speaker for this morning's class, Jim Barnaby. Jim has brought his solar cooking experience to the RTR for the last 4 years and is here to share it with you today. You may also know him for his work with solar at his website, jimindenver.com, or his YouTube channel, Solar Boondocker, where he talks about solar power, solar cooking, and internet connections. Let's hope the weather allows him to show his solar cookers today. Everyone, please welcome Jim Barnaby. Thank you.
Morning. As said, I'm Jim Barnaby. I'm glad to be here. Let's talk about some solar cooking. Solar cooking is basically using sunlight to heat a vessel and cook in it. Now, sunlight, when it strikes something black, is converted into heat. So the first thing that's important in solar cooking is the cooking vessel. This type of cooking vessel, which is just your basic camping pot enamelware, is what we use for solar cooking. It's black, it's thin metalled, it transmits the heat easily, and it fits into most solar cookers. This is the most popular that you'll find. It's a 3-quart. I use all kinds of different ones, including turkey roasters, bread makers, big pots, little pots. I have cabinets full of different solar cooking ware. As long as it's black, it can work in all different solar cookers. In solar ovens, which are sealed ovens that are insulated and the heat is allowed to build up, you can use any type of cookware, but it's easiest and best to start out with black cookware. You put it in and it becomes part of the heating vessel. Some of the kits will come with little things such as this expandable pot. It's silicone. It's good for making smaller meals. I apologize, I'm not used to working like this. But as long as it's black, it can go into any of the different types of solar cookers. The second thing that's needed for solar cooking, of course, is the sunshine. If you don't get it out when it's hot, or not hot, but at least sunny, then solar cookers just can't work. Any of them that do get warm in the clouds just don't get up to cooking temperatures. And the temperatures I'm used to seeing are somewhere between 200 and 375, depending on the cookers I use. That's more than enough to cook anything you can imagine. I've cooked full-size turkeys, loaves of bread, roast, baby back ribs, spare back ribs. If you can imagine it, as long as you're not deep frying it or frying it, you can cook it in a solar cooker. When your cooker easily gets up into the 300s, you don't have any problem boiling water. So every once in a while, I'll see eggs on sale. I'll buy a dozen, put the water in the pot, get it nice and hot, drop the eggs in for 10 minutes, boiled eggs. And it's just that easy. No propane in the house, no heat in the house, and no worry about it either. One thing about solar cooking is everything you do is sealed. In a solar oven, the lid seals it and keeps all the heat and the moisture in. In a reflective cooker, you put things either into a oven bag, or in some of the reflective cookers, they actually seal themselves. But again, the moisture and the heat stays inside with the cooking vessel, And the fact that you can't lose any moisture means that you don't dry things out. And in order to burn something, you have to dry it out. So you can't really burn anything in a solar cooker. You can, however, overcook it. If you put in, say, like a chicken and leave it in there for about 4 hours, you can mash it with a potato masher. There are a variety of different solar cookers. Solar ovens I've mentioned, which is basically an insulated box with a metal interior and a sealed top, and generally reflectors helping concentrating the light into that box. Those are the bulkiest of the cookers. Well, at least the ones I use. They work great. I mean, I tend to pull them out before I pull anything out. And I love it when people come up and say, oh, you can't cook this, and it's like a challenge. I can find ways to cook almost anything, again, except for frying and deep frying. Reflective cookers, whereas a solar oven would have the reflectors above the cooking area, concentrating the light into it. A reflective cooker, the pot sits inside the reflectors, and it's the reflectors themselves are used to concentrate the light and make sure that it hits all sides of the pot, and just instead of the side facing the sun. This way, the whole pot becomes the heating element. And believe me, 2 things you want while you're running a solar cooker is a pair of sunglasses and a set of oven gloves. Because if the thermometer inside the solar cooker says 375, everything in there is 375 degrees, and you're going to burn yourself if you touch it. General cooking times, if you're baking, say, bread, is about an hour, depending on your cooker and the conditions. The one reflective cooker I'll show you today takes longer than most, but once you get used to it, it's just, well, you ever go on a trip and when the kid says, are we there yet? And you say, we'll be there when we'll be there. Well, with solar cooking, it's done cooking when it's done cooking. And most people can look at a loaf of bread or a batch of cornbread and have a pretty good idea when it's coming up to being done. You know, when you want to stick a knife into it or a toothpick and see that it's cooked. With meats, I always suggest using a meat thermometer. It's just a good idea with, even if you're not cooking on a stove or in an oven or any way you're cooking, you always want to make sure whatever you're cooking is safe. So a meat thermometer is important. Generally though, if I'm doing meats, you pretty much know when it's done because it falls off the bone. It just becomes melt in your mouth tender. I have 2 different solar cookers to show you today, and the first one is a solar oven, and let me show you that real quick. Okay, so this is a solar oven. You can see it has the reflectors on top which help concentrate the light into the box. It has a lid that seals it when it's in use. And if I open it up, set that down like that, you can see that's a hard metal sheet painted black, and that black converts light to heat. As you can see, this one's pretty scuffed up. I use my solar cookers as often as I possibly can. So I got this one in January of 2014, and I've been using it ever since. It's pretty beat up looking, but it still works fine. Basically, the pot goes in it. Like that. The lid goes on it like that. it snaps into place. One of the ways I generally know that things are done being cooked is the steam will start building up on the lid. And that means that whatever the food I'm cooking has become the temperature of boiling water, because it's steaming the water out of whatever food I'm cooking. The second cooker I'll show you. Get that to sit up there. This is a Sunflare reflective cooker. It, again, the pot just sits in there on top of that rack. The reflectors reflect the sun onto the pot from all directions. And again, in here, I can cook just about anything I want, except for frying or deep frying. You can bake cookies, make bread, roast, anything you want. It does take longer than the oven and some of the other reflective cookers because it's not as shiny. The convenience to this one is the face of it closes and creates the seal instead of needing a cooking bag. The other thing is it folds up into a tiny little package that fits in a bag. And it's the cooker I most often suggest to van dwellers because it takes up the least amount of room. When you get it, you get the rack that's inside there, a cookie sheet, the 3-quart pan I showed you earlier, and 2 of those collapsible silicone pans. And the last time somebody bought one on Amazon, I believe it was $165 for the whole kit. It's the easiest way I know to get everything you need to get into solar cooking. There are, let me switch back here. So cooking times in a solar cooker, like I said, things are done when they're done. But generally, if you're using an oven and your cooking time is anywhere from 375 down, the solar oven is going to cook just like the oven inside your RV, inside your house. If your cooking temperature is 350, well, you're going to be done a little bit earlier. You can control the temperature. You can cool down the solar ovens. You can't really increase the temperature. So if I really wanted to cool down a solar oven, I would turn it slightly out of the sun. If I wanted to turn up a solar oven, then I just leave things in there longer. But again, for meats, anything past 3.5 hours, and you're really beginning, unless it's a huge chunk of meat, you're really beginning to overcook it. In the first oven I showed you, I've cooked a full-size turkey for Thanksgiving. I've cooked a pork shoulder ham. In fact, for one Thanksgiving, I had 3 solar ovens out. I cooked a full-size turkey, a pork shoulder ham, 4 quarts of yams, 4 dozen rolls, 4 batches of cornbread, and a double-layer lemon cake. I got to tell you, when you're running 3 ovens all at once, you are very, very busy. All in all, I have 7 different solar cookers that I use. The first one you saw was called a Solarvore Sport Oven. They're not easy to find anymore, but if you go to eBay occasionally, you can find them. It really is my favorite because it doesn't react badly in the wind. I've seen it skid across the campsite without tipping over in highly windy conditions. One of the solar ovens that's more easily accessed right now is called the All-American Solar Oven. I think they're running around $350 or so. It also comes with 2 of those black pots and a variety of racks and things like that, depending on what size kit you get. It takes deeper pots than the sport oven. It gets hotter than the sport oven, which is limited to 300 degrees. The All-American can get as hot as it possibly can. I've heard reports of people getting it up to 400 degrees. I already showed you the solar flare, or excuse me, the Sunflare solar reflector oven. It is a hybrid between a oven and a reflective cooker. It seals itself. It's slightly insulated, so you can try to do actual baking in there. I generally just use the black pots and cook like I would any other reflective cooker. I also use the all-season solar cooker, which is a reflective box cooker. The nice thing about it is it actually gets a lot hotter than the Sunflare cooker does. It is a little bulkier once it's set up, but when it's collapsed, it really doesn't take up that much room. Two of the cookers I use, I don't know if Dr. Solstice is still operating, but I use his dual, his solo, his duo, and his Quattro. And the Quattro you can see on my YouTube solar Boondocker. I know he's cooked a 17-pound turkey in it, or you can stack 6 of those 3-quart pots inside of there and cook them all. It really is a solar oven or a solar cooker that's made for making meals for a large family. The Solo is basically the same thing, except it's made more to take a coffee cup size pot. So you can get bigger or smaller. When you fold those up, the Solo actually fits into a small manila envelope. The Duo, which will take about a 2-quart pot, really folds up to almost nothing. It's made out of cardstock. I don't know if those are available, but if you search Dr. Solstice, you might be able to find them on the net. There are a couple of types of cookers that I don't carry. I don't carry a vacuum tube cooker. This is a black tube that sits in the middle of a reflective background. The food slide, really, the downside to them is it gets incredibly hot. In fact, sometimes too hot. And all of your food has to fit into a long, thin tray. So chicken legs work out great. Turkey, well, it might be kind of hard to fit in the tube. Another type of cooker that I don't carry simply because of the bulk is a parabolic cooker, which is what looks like a giant satellite dish that points at the sun, and you stick a pan on a stand where the light concentrates, and as long as the dot of light hits the bottom of the pan, it'll heat up the pan, and you can fry and boil water and things like that. The downside to them is that spot of light is incredibly hot, to the point that people like to test them by sticking 2x4s in a piece of light just to show people how quickly it'll light it on fire. So you really have to be careful when you're frying, because right where the dot of light is incredibly hot, but anywhere the dot of light isn't shining is cold. So if you're frying on it, you have to constantly move it around to make sure the whole pan gets hot. The other thing is the sun moves constantly, and with a parabolic cooker, you have to keep that dot under the pan, so you have to constantly adjust it. Something like a reflective cooker or a solar oven, well, basically you can use the rule of thirds. You get it hot and you turn it to the right until the sun is coming in the left side of the cooker, and you can leave it there for probably 3 hours as the sun tracks across the sky. And you just won't have to move it. You're within its realm of collecting sunlight. Let's see, the last type is called a Fresnel lens, which is basically a giant magnifying lens that, just like you used to be able to take a magnifying lens and concentrate the beam of light until it would light a piece of paper on fire, you can concentrate a beam of light onto a black vessel and heat that up from the top side, just like the parabolic dish heats the vessel up from the bottom side. It has the same disadvantages as the parabolic dish, where only where the beam of light is gets hot, and you constantly have to readjust it because the sun moves. I'd love to be able to have all of the different types, but we are van dwellers and RV dwellers, and carrying as many as I do is a miracle. I'd almost have to have a garage to carry them all. It'd be fun though. Trying to think of here. I end up cooking just about everything. The last couple of things I cooked were rice pudding, and everybody in my camp was on diets, and I delayed doing it until one day I mentioned it, and everybody went, "Oh, well, we'll eat rice pudding." And so I made 4 quarts of rice pudding, which disappeared rather quickly, but it was really easy. Stick the rice in the oven, cook it, pull it out nice and hot, add in a milk and egg mixture, stir it in slowly so the eggs didn't cook, and shove it back in the oven for about an hour, and that was it. Rice pudding. Dish it out, pour on some heavy cream and some blueberries, and it was a wonderful dessert. Pineapple upside down cake is one of my favorites. They come out incredible. Any cake that you tend to cook in the solar cooker, because the moisture does not escape, tends to come out like a pudding cake, very moist, not like brownie moist, but just not dried out. Now, when I do cakes, I prefer to use the solar ovens and a lighter colored pan. That way the pan itself does not become part of the heating element. When that happens, the outside of the cake tends to cook faster than the inside. So as you get used to using solar cookers, you'll find that there's nuances, different types of pans, different sizes. You learn to adapt your recipes to what's happening in the solar cooker. If I want to make a stew or a soup, I basically put all the ingredients in minus the water. The water is already in the meat, it's already in the vegetables, and once it gets done cooking down, you open up the pot and it's half to 3/4 full of water or juice already. And that's just the juice that was in the meat that normally would have evaporated off. In a solar cooker, it can't get out, and so it stays there. Preparation for solar cooking is no different than preparation for cooking in your oven at home. I can put together a quick pozole simply by opening up various cans of peppers, hominy, tomatoes, chop up an onion, put in some garlic, the pork. That's it. Stir it, toss it in the solar cooker for, I don't know, an hour, stir it, put it back in for an hour, stir it, put it back in for an hour, and that's it, you're done. It was about 15 minutes to get the food in there and very little effort in between. The nicest thing about a solar cooker is I just came from quartzsite, where we had temperatures while I was there up to 117 degrees. I still want to eat, I still want to cook. I certainly don't want the temperature or the heat inside my RV, be it from the stovetop or from my oven. So I put my food in a solar cooker outside, cook a nice corned beef brisket or stew or something, and never get it hot inside. And I have to tell you, when it's 117, even when I'm running my air conditioners, if I turn on the stovetop even just a little, it gets hot inside.
Excuse me, Jim, sorry to interrupt. You have 5 minutes left for your presentation, and that is now open for questions from attendees.
Okay. All righty. So again, the basic solar cookers are solar ovens, which are sealed and insulated with a black interior. So reflective cookers are reflective all around, and a black pot sits inside them to create the heat. A parabolic is where it reflects the light from the bottom up to the pot and you can fry. Fresno is where it reflects or concentrates the light from above down onto a pot. And the vacuum tube cooker, which is a long, thin glass tube that a tray slides in, and the reflectors help concentrate the light on the backside of it. All of them work incredibly well. They all have their differences, and you just get one and start using it, and you'd be amazed. It's really easy to learn. So I guess we'll have questions and answers, and I'll do my best to answer any question I can. What do you want to cook? How much room do you have to hold a solar cooker? And what kind of weather conditions are you in? Those are the big questions. I want to make sure that
You're ready for your questions, Jim. I will take your questions, read your questions in the order that they came in. And for those of you who are new, please find your chat and type your questions by clicking the 3 little dots or more. You'll find your chat, type your questions, and send them to Jim. Thank you.
Oh, I'm going to have to be able to read them? Oh,
no,
boy.
I'll read them to you, Jim. Your first one comes from Val, and she says, thank you for the interesting presentation, Jim. Can you give tips on cleanup and care of cookers, given we don't have much water in camp?
All righty. So one nice thing about a solar cooker is because things don't burn, cleanup of the pots is a lot easier. You don't have anything you have to scrape off or scrub off. You know, nothing caramelizes. If I did want to cook without any cleanup at all, I would use a cooking bag to line the pot. And that way, when I'm done, I pull out the cooking bag, and that's it. Keeping the solar cookers clean means keeping the glass covers clean, the reflectors clean, and on the occasion that you spill something inside of it, wiping it down. But really, there's very little cleanup if you do it. On a regular basis, I throw frozen burritos in one of the cookers, and I just set them on a paper plate. In my channel, I hope to show how the cookers work, not just for the fancy things like doing a turkey, but everyday things like frozen burritos and frozen meals and cans of soup and the simple things we eat every day.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jim. Karen asked, great presentation, Jim, to you. Do you have resource suggestions for those who might like to do DIY ones?
If you research solar cooker plans, I don't have the website on the top of my head right now, but there is a website that brings up a page of maybe 30 or more solar cooker plans, and you click on each one, and it gives you the actual plan. And I'll send Alicia the website so she can post it. But just by searching solar cooker plans, you'll find it, and it's a great resource. A lot of the solar cookers are very easy to create.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Okay, and David says, hi, Jim. How long to cook a dozen eggs?
Well, it depends on what method you use. If you dry roast them, I'd say about 30 minutes in a hot cooker. But the easiest way is to bring the water up to a boil, and just like you would on the stove, set your eggs in it, leave them there for however long you would on the stove, because it's exactly the same temperature. So what I imagine 8 to 10 minutes for anywhere from a soft to a hard boil, and take them out and cool them, and so that they peel easy and they come out great. I have tried putting them into cool water and then bringing the pot up, but it takes so long to bring the temperature of the water up that I think it overcooks the eggs. So it's just easier to start from hot and do it that way. You might risk cracking an egg, but it'll be okay.
And Matt is complimenting you. He says, thank you, Jim. Great job. Mark says, how durable are the folding cookers? Have you made your own?
I've never made my own cooker. I'm too lazy, and I like the quality of the built ones. Almost all of them are extremely durable. The Dr. Solstice ones that are made on cardstock, I would have to say, are the least durable, and you just have to be a little bit careful with them about scratching their surface, and you might have to tape the edges like a hinge after a while because it is cardstock. But in general, most of them, the Sunflare I've had for 4 years. The two solar ovens I was talking about, I've had since 2014. An all-season solar cooker is made on corrugated plastic corrugated cardboard stock, and it's extremely durable. Yeah, I actually haven't had one wear out, not yet.
Wonderful. So Darlene has about 3 questions in here. I'll grab one and then come back to her if we have additional time. She says, hi folks, thank you for the class. I'm wondering whether you are aware of anything coming new down in the pipe in terms of solar cooking.
I haven't heard of anything just recently. I think what I would call the second markets are catching up with the vacuum tubes. So I'm beginning to see a lot less expensive vacuum tube cookers on eBay and Amazon. But unless a different manufacturer puts out one, it's just who's making what, and if you can find something that works for you. I have so many that I'm afraid that if I find something new, I'm going to buy it.
Okay, and Dietrich says, thank you for a great presentation. Can you give times for cooking things like the turkey, etc.?
The last 2 times I cooked a turkey, it was 3.5 hours. Baby back ribs come in, depending on the size of the ribs, anywhere from 2.5 to 3.5 hours. Spare ribs, 3 to 3.5 hours. A chicken, 3 to 3.5 hours. The chicken is pretty easy because you put it in that round pan I showed you and put the lid on it. When the lid pops up, it means that the legs have spread. And generally, it's better than a pop-up indicator on a turkey. When those legs spread, it's done. A loaf of bread takes an hour. Pull-apart rolls take about an hour. Now, in the Sunflare reflective cooker, I double almost everything on breads and things like that. I add like an hour or so on the cookers. One thing you should get used to when using the cookers is if you really want to guarantee they're going to be done, be ready to cook about 10 a.m. And that way you get the prime of the day to cook in. And after about 2, 3 o'clock, the sun is really beginning to go down. And you know, if your oven's hot, it'll stay hot. But if you start cooking, then you're probably in trouble.
Okay, this one's from Linda. She says, thank you for the info. When you buy a solar kit, does all the cookware come with the kit?
Well, there's versions of all the different cookers with and without the cookware. Like the Sunflare, you can buy just the cooker rack and a thermometer for $100. Or if you spend the full $165, you get the 3-quart pot, cookie sheets, the collapsible pans. I don't think I've ever seen the sport oven or the American oven unless it's an aftermarket on eBay without the pots. But when you're looking at them, if the pots aren't shown, they're not sent. Having said that, I've made a collection of pots over the years from seeing something at Ace, Walmart. Goodwill is a great place because any place that sells used camping gear generally has used enamelware that goes along with it.
Great. And Amira says, thank you, Jim. Excellent presentation. I'm also a solar cook. Love, love, love cooking with the sun. It is great to keep the cooking heat outside. And Randy says, have you baked breads and approximately how long does it take?
I tend to do frozen bread rolls and frozen loaves of bread. So after it rises, about an hour in an oven and maybe an hour to 2 hours in the Sunflare. I haven't really baked bread in most of the reflective cookers. But you know, one thing with bread is if you want a nice brown top, you spritz it with water before you start cooking. And really, you can look, you can just look at the bread and you can see that it's expanded and you're beginning to get the crust that you want. So really, when it's nice and golden brown, it's pretty much done. But at least an hour. One thing about a solar cooker is your oven, when you put something cold into your oven, the flame comes on and it heats it back up really quickly. Solar cookers aren't so fast to recover. So it can take a little bit longer, but again, you know, just keep your eyes on it. And most of the time you can see when a cake or a bread is taken care of.
And David asked, if you could only have one cooker, which one do you recommend?
At this point in time, since the sport oven isn't available, I would imagine the American Sun oven, because it gets to be the hottest and it's the most versatile. It does have the downside of being a little top heavy when it's windy, so I have to protect it. But other than that, it holds large pots. It makes nice temperature. It heats up quickly and it's very adjustable. I think you could find those. I think the last time I looked around the 320, 350 area with all the pots and things like that on Amazon and eBay. And yeah, it's the most versatile. It takes up the most room too, unfortunately.
Wonderful. And another question says, if you have to clean the glass in the cooker, do you use Windex or other glass cleaners?
Oh, yeah. The glass on the various cookers is, it's tempered glass in the American Sun oven, and the sport oven that I showed you before is, I think it's Lexan, which is kind of like a plastic. So I do tend to try to be careful with it, but if you get grease or something on the inside of it, you got to get it cleaned off. So yeah, I'll use Windex and a damp cloth and then polish it after.
Okay, great. And Linda says, can you use cast iron as the cooking vessel in the solar oven?
The problem with cast iron is the metal itself takes so much of the heat when you're cooking, and keeping it hot takes a lot of heat. So it takes longer to heat up the pot, and it just shortens your cooking time. The pots that I showed you are very thin walled, so they transmit the heat they create to the food very easily.
Okay. And Karen says, for reflectors, what do you use to keep them clean to reduce scratching, which I think would dull effectiveness over the years if scratched?
Yeah, my first line of defense is like a Swiffer duster, just to get the light dust that is going to happen every day. After that, it's a damp cloth and possibly Windex and a dry cloth to polish it. I use a damp cloth first, and that way the dirt doesn't scratch the reflective material. But eventually, you either have to replace it or recover it with something shiny. I've never really had to do that with mine, and like I said, 2 of them I've used since 2014.
Awesome. So David asked, what was the name of the second cooker fold-up type you showed?
That was a Sunflare.
Wonderful. And Swen has posted the link to several Amazon links for the cookers, the solar cookers. for everyone to see. Can I use my black cast iron Dutch oven in a solar oven, or would it take too long to get hot due to its thickness?
I suppose if you were to put one into something like the American Sun oven, it would get hot, but it takes up a long time to, it absorbs a lot of the heat just heating up the metal. So you're going to lose a lot of cooking time just getting that vessel hot.
Okay. And are you familiar, Kathy asked, are you familiar with the Haynes 2.0 solar cooker? It seems like it's a reasonable price and has good reviews.
I can't say I know that one off the top of my head. I'd have to look it up and give you an opinion about it. But yeah, I really don't know. But,
okay. Roxanne says, could you or would you use the liner of a crock pot with a clear lid?
Again, a crock pot is generally a clay pot, and again, it's a very thick-walled pot, and it would absorb an awful lot of heat just heating up the vessel. I do use clear lids on pots so I can watch the cooking and not have to open up the oven to check on it. But I almost always use a very thin-walled pot.
And another one for you. You seem to cook large meals for friends. Do you think it's worth having a solar cooker for one person?
Well, that's one of the things I want to showcase on my channel is I cook for myself most of the time, and I don't cook big fancy meals. I cook anything from on a daily basis. I'll drop a couple of thawed frozen burritos in there. I have a whole series of videos that I want to do on encore frozen entrees, which are very inexpensive, but they include like frozen lasagna and chicken cordon bleu, Salisbury steak. As long as you, I cook for myself in two ways. Either I'll cook a large meal and then split it up and freeze the leftovers, or like those two small collapsible pans, you can put a very small meal in there and cook them too. My smallest cooker, I can take like a can of beans, dump them in a black coffee cup, put a lid on it, set it in there for an hour, and that's done. Very little cleanup, very little effort. So yeah, I really want to show how the cookers can be used on an everyday basis, not just the fancy meals most people tend to want to make.
Wonderful. And Kathy said, you mentioned that the pots are thin-walled. Would I be able to use a cast iron enamel pot such as Le Creuset, if I pronounce that correctly, in these?
The one time I think, as long as it's black and thin-walled, I would say it's approved. In anything that's thicker, just absorbs too much of the heat trying to cook. The one thing that I would try is in the bottom of my solar cookers, I would put a cast iron griddle and let it really get heated up before I put food on it. But that's because I want something that will retain and help hold the heat. But the pot itself that I would put on top of that would be a thin-walled pot that would transmit the heat very easily. I suppose if I had a griddle in the bottom, I could probably fry a steak or an egg on it, because it would get up to whatever temperature the oven was, and so I would have a 375-degree griddle to grill on. I've just never tried that.
Okay. And Darlene asked, she wants to know, is there anything you wish was better about the current solar technology? Thank you.
I would like to see a folding solar oven that could fold up to a smaller form factor and be stored. I like the ovens better than the reflective cookers. It's just that they're so bulky. So one that could be taken apart and folded up somehow and put into a box or a bag would be nice.
Okay, and Darlene also going back to her question before, is there anything you wish was different about the solar cooking capacity you have?
Um, just that I had more food to put in them. No.
Okay. Linda says, could you cook risotto or something that requires regular stirring? I would think the constant lifting of the lid to stir would be a bad idea.
Um, so one of the reasons you have to stir pots is because they're on top of a stove and the heat only comes from the bottom. But in a solar cooker, the heat comes from all sides. So you don't have to stir so often to make sure everything's getting heated evenly. Uh, in one of the solar ovens, because the interior is metal and it's insulated, you can open the lid of the pot, give it a quick stir, close everything back up again, and it's not going to have a huge effect on it. The reflective cookers, it's a little bit more awkward. The Sunflare, you have to unzip the lid to the cooker, and in a regular reflective cooker, you have to open up the bag, the cooking bag that seals the pot and keeps the moisture in. But again, once everything is nice and hot, the recovery time isn't that bad. So you could do things that needed to be stirred.
Okay, and Kathy says she's desperate to use my cast iron Dutch oven. I'm going to consider heating the cast iron pot on my propane stove. It retains the heat well and could then be transferred to the solar oven. Maybe that's loopy.
Well, give it a shot. I've actually thought about doing that with various things that I was cooking to help the cookers do the job. So I'd love to hear how it works for you.
Okay. And Karen says, I've had to fend off some chipmunks from my little Go Son Go. Do you camp in bear country? And if so, any concerns?
I've actually never had, outside of maybe a dog, I've never had an animal approach any of the cookers. It might help that I have this wonderful little schnauzer named Max that probably would try to keep anything away, but I just generally have not had any animal involvement in my stuff. And I've cooked, I've done it anywhere from the Rocky Mountains down here to Arizona, and it just hasn't been an issue.
Okay, and Darlene asked, what is the latest time of day you can cook where you are located?
The latest time of day that I would start cooking, if it was something that didn't take a long time, would be about 1 o'clock. I like to get things started early, just simply because if it does start turning partially cloudy and your food is already heated up, it'll survive the partially cloudy and continue cooking. If after, I don't know, about 1 o'clock, you just aren't going to get things heated up and keep them hot long enough, in my opinion. Bread, cornbread, things like that, you might be okay late, but they're things that cook very quickly and don't absorb a lot of heat when they're doing it. I've actually heated up one of the ovens during a presentation and then turned it out of the sun with a batch of cornbread in there. And just the fact that it was heated up finished cooking the cornbread without being facing the sun. Anything meat, I really suggest you get in there early. I've cooked as early as dawn, but it seems like the evening hours just aren't as productive as the morning hours.
And how about overcast days?
I know when I was doing a demonstration and had one of the vacuum tube cookers that it was overcast and I was actually getting heat in the vacuum tube cooker when I was doing it. Some of the other solar cookers will actually start warming up, but I don't really think I would trust them to get hot enough to say they were cooking. The soul in solar is sun, and we really need sunlight to operate our solar panels and our solar cookers and things like that. And so have a backup, because it's not uncommon to prepare or get ready to cook a meal and look outside and go, it's cloudy. And then I end up cooking on the stove.
Okay. Have you ever considered going to manufacturers to see if you could share your wisdom to come up with an improved cooker? It could be called the Jim in Denver model.
Well, I do know a couple of the manufacturers, and really the biggest thing I would suggest to them is to make something smaller, because as one person said, they wanted to be able to cook for a single person. And so something that's smaller and handles a smaller pot efficiently is about the biggest thing I would suggest. I love the Sunflare because it folds up and goes into what looks like a little shopping bag. And convenience for setup and storage and size is the biggest thing I would suggest.
Okay, and Jen Safari says, does all seasoned cookers actually cook longer than the others, as it says, due to its shape?
Let's see, the last thing I cooked in an all-season solar cooker was a pot of rice, and I actually found that it got much hotter than the Sunflare, and the rice was ready in the normal amount of time. Really, you have to get used to the individual cookers as they are. I noticed which one cooks longer or takes longer than another because I cook them, I use them side by side. But if you buy a single one, you'll get used to the time it takes. And each one of them's a little different. You have to learn the nuances of your solar cooker.
Okay, and Kathy says, I may have missed this, but you mentioned some oven constructed of corrugated plastic. I see an example online, but I don't understand how they don't melt.
Okay, that's I have two that are made from corrugated plastic. One is the Quattro from Dr. Solstice, and there's a video on my channel of that being put together. And then the all-season solar cooker, and I know that's demonstrated on my interview with Bob when I did the reflective cookers. The reason they don't melt is they don't get hot. They reflect sunlight onto a pot, and the pot gets hot. So the pot sits on a trivet inside the cooker, and it never touches the walls. So it doesn't transmit any of the heat to the cooker itself. The cooker just reflects the sunlight in.
Amazing. And David wants to know, can you boil water in the Sunflare?
I've had the water in the Sunflare. I put 4 quarts of water in there and had it up to 190 degrees. I was never able to get a rolling boil out of it. Possibly if I had a smaller amount of water in there, I would have. But the transition from liquid to steam takes a lot of energy, and I just don't think the Sunflare will get up to the point that it actually creates a rolling boil. That said, any thicker liquid like broth in stews, oils, things like that, I'll open up the pot and I'll see it simmering along. But just a large pot of water, the best I've been able to do in the Sunflare is 190 degrees, which generally will boil things like pasta and eggs, and is a great temperature for making your coffee. If you're going to use it for doing your dishes, you're going to want to temper it down with some cold water.
Really awesome. Which cooker is easiest to set up, clean up, take down, and restore?
I would say for the reflective cookers, I would say the Sunflare, and in the ovens, I would say the Sun Oven, the American Sun Oven, simply because it's the one that's available now. In the American Sun Oven, you basically just fold the reflectors down, and that's it. If you have to wipe out the inside because you spilled something, it's just basically wiping it out. And I'd say once you get used to the Sunflare, it takes maybe a minute to set it up and take it down again.
Okay, Jim, you have 4 minutes left for your presentation. So if you have additional questions, please send them in for Jim. Dan wants to know, what is your channel called?
Solar Boondocker. 2 words.
Wonderful. David said, besides the sun exposure, does the elevation help in the heating and cooking? Would being at 8,000 feet be different than 4,000 feet?
I suppose it does, because you have thinner air, less pollution, less humidity. I really don't think it makes a huge difference. My American sun oven generally gets between 350 and 375. It has more to do with how high the sun is in the sky than it does elevation itself. And I have used the cookers in freezing cold temperatures. I've actually used a snowbank to shove them in and hold them in place.
Okay, wonderful. And Sue-Ann has placed the link for your YouTube channel for everyone to see. Thank you, Sue-Ann.
Thank you.
And how long did you say you have been doing solar cooking, Jim?
Since January of 2014.
Wonderful. Okay, if you could expound on, oh, Kathy says, thank you for the information, Jim. Very useful. I'm intrigued to give this a try.
Once you get used to doing it, it's kind of addictive. You start wanting to try more and more recipes, and after you figure out that it's all pretty easy, it's just an everyday thing, like using their microwave, except it takes a little longer.
Okay, and then your final question. Oh, hold on, Jim, another one's coming in. If shopping on Amazon, don't forget to shop via Amazon Smile and choose HOWA so they receive a donation. Thank you, Amira, for that post. And Deirdre said, do you cook solely or on solar energy? Do you cook solely on solar energy?
Actually, I have I have my solar cookers, but like today, we went from being nice and sunny at the beginning to now it's completely overcast. So I have my propane stove in my trailer. I have an outdoor stove. I have a propane oven, and I haven't pulled it out in quite a while, but I do have an infrared grill. You just, oh, and I even use a microwave. But you have to have backups when you're depending on the sun.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much, Jim, for your amazing show of solar ovens and detail of cooking. We appreciate you attendees for being here. Do enjoy your weekend. Jim, do you have any closing remarks?
You know, you can start this simply by getting a windshield reflector, a black pot, a cooking bag, fold the reflector into a shape that it reflects the light onto the black pot, and give it a shot. See, it's not the most effective solar cooker, but it gives you a start to see if you want to do it. And as far as the biggest thing I'd say is, don't get it and put it on a shelf, because when you do need it, you're not going to know how to use it. Get it, start cooking in it, start learning how things get cooked in it, and you'll get used to it, and it'll become an everyday item for you. Come see me on my YouTube channel. Coming up, I'm going to be doing many more recipes. I want to show how the cookers can be used on a day-to-day basis, and along with talking about solar power and internet. So I hope to see you there, and thank you for attending the class. I've had fun doing it. Oh, I guess I'm still talking. See, I'm not used to this. Oh, and the other thing is, come see me at my website at jimindenver.com. There I design solar systems and help people install them. Basically, we just sit down and talk about your needs and what's your vehicle. can handle and how you want to take care of it. And just like solar cooking, we figure out a way to make it happen for you.
Many thanks, Jim. You could stay on for an additional 15 minutes in the chat and mute and stop video. Much appreciated.
All righty. Well, thank you guys. Have a great weekend.